Weeks ago, at least right before Christmas, we finished up Proverbs chapter number 10. So tonight we're going to look at Proverbs 11. We're obviously not going to get through the whole chapter. I've been trying to take things a little bit slower than we had been during the first part of this chapter. So tonight we'll probably get down to about maybe verse 5, 4, 5, 6, somewhere down around there. And we just take it one step at a time. This chapter, like we did last chapter. That last chapter, chapter number 10, was a very unique chapter. It was probably the key chapter, I believe, in this book of Proverbs. And I don't know about you, but I learned a lot just myself, just by doing my own personal study in Proverbs chapter number 10. So tonight, Proverbs chapter number 11. What we'll do, we'll just take a little bit of time, and we'll read down through a few of the verses, and then we'll come back and get the verses that we can. I'd like to see, Brother Mike, how about reading about maybe the first 6 verses of that?
Proverbs 11. A false balance is abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. When pride cometh, then cometh shame, but with the lowly is wisdom. The integrity of the upright shall guide them, but the perverseness of transgressors shall destroy them. Riches profit not in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivereth from death. The righteousness of the perfect shall direct his way, but the wicked shall fall by his own wickedness. The righteous of the upright shall deliver them, but transgressors shall be taken in their own naughtiness.
How about somebody reading maybe 7 through 12? Somebody do that for me tonight? Ronald, stand up and read it for me.
Hopes placed in mortals die with them. All the promises of their power comes to nothing. The righteous person is rescued from trouble, and it falls on the wicked instead. With their mouths the godless destroy their neighbors, but through knowledge the righteous escape. When the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. When the wicked perish, there are shouts of joy. Through the blessing of the upright a city is exalted, but by the mouth of the wicked it is destroyed. Whoever derides their neighbor has no sense, but the one who has understanding holds their tongue.
Did you read Proverbs 11?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, different.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I was looking and I'm like, he must be on a different chapter, so I stopped after the first verse. So how about somebody reading maybe 13 through 19? So I get somebody to do that. Paul, stand up and read that for me.
The talebearer revealeth secrets, but he that is of a faithful spirit concealeth the matter. Where no counsel is, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety. He that is surety for a stranger shall smart for it, and he that hateth suretyship is sure. A gracious woman retaineth honor, and strong men retain riches.
Yeah, that's fine. Melina, how about, or John, how about 1:17 through 22 or something, 23 something?
A merciful man doeth good to his own soul, that he that is cruel troubleth his own flesh. The wicked worketh a deceitful work, but to him that soweth righteousness shall be a sure reward. As righteousness tendeth the life, so he that pursueth evil pursueth it to his own death. What did you say, Howard?
About 22.
Okay. They that are of a froward heart are abomination to the Lord, but such as are upright in their way are his delight. Though hand join in hand, the wicked shall not be unpunished, but the seed of the righteous shall be delivered. As a jewel of gold in a swine's snout, so is a fair woman which is without discretion.
Gary Conger, can I get you to read maybe 23 through 27?
The desire of the righteous is only good, but the expectation of the wicked is wrath. There is that scattereth and yet increases, and there is that withhold more than is met, but is tender to the poverty. The liberal soul shall be made fat, and he that watereth shall be watered also himself. He that withholdeth corn, the people shall curse him, but blessing shall come upon the head of him that selleth it. He that diligently seek good prospereth favor, but he that seeketh mischief, it shall come unto him. He that trusteth his own riches shall fall, but the righteousness shall flourish as a branch. He that troubleth his own house shall inherit the wind, and the fool shall be a servant to the wise of heart. The fruit of the righteous is the tree of life, and he that winneth souls is wise. Behold, the righteous shall recompense in the earth, much more the wicked and the sinner.
Thank you for reading that tonight. We'll go back and we'll just start taking this verse by verse tonight and see how far we get in the next few minutes. Proverbs 11, verse number 1 says this: a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. Let me start off tonight by just simply saying this. We serve a God tonight that is both just, we serve a God tonight that is fair, and we serve a God tonight that is also right. And I believe as Christians, he expects us to be the same way. I don't know that there may not be anything more offensive to God than to be deceitful in our business transactions. Here the Bible says a false balance is an abomination to the Lord. And that false balance refers to unjust business dealings and how we handle things when we maybe we're selling something to somebody, or we have a business or something. The Bible's just telling us that we need to be honest and we need to be fair and not cheat people in our everyday business transaction things. Now, we have to be very careful ourselves when we buy things from other people, especially in the world that we live in today. We have to be careful because we know that there's all kinds of people out there just looking to do that exact same thing. I remember it's been, 5-6 years ago, maybe longer than that. I remember me and Paula, we bought a used automobile off a car lot. This gentleman had a car lot right across the street from my daddy's church. And we were looking for something to get some pretty good gas mileage just to get back and forth to work with and what have you. And we bought this car off this guy. And we had test driven it maybe just around the block or what have you. And went back a couple of days later, he still had it. So we started talking to him and ended up buying the car off of him. And Paula ended up driving home, and I went the other direction. Headed back to work or something. I don't remember exactly what I was doing that day. But I remember getting a phone call from her. She was about a mile down the road, and the transmission had gone out on that car already. So we parked it, and I came and got her, took her home, and went back down to see the guy. And the guy says, I told him he's just a mile down the road. And he said, well, sorry, it's yours. Once you drive it off the lot, that's yours. And but here's the problem with that. When I took the car, I had it towed to a garage to have the transmission checked out to see exactly what was wrong with it. The mechanic, the guy the transmission shop that looked at it, here's what he said. He says, I'm going to tell you right now, somebody just recently has made some adjustments and done some things to this transmission. I can tell by the way that some of these bolts and stuff are not tight. And just some other things that he was looking at that he told me. He said, I can just tell you right now that that somebody has been messing with this transmission. He says it looks like somebody was just trying to fix it just long enough to sell it and dump it on somebody so he didn't have to put any more money into it. But I knew the guy that had sold us the car. I knew his background. I knew that he actually worked as a mechanic for one of the car lots, one of the big car lots up in Marietta. So I knew that he knew probably exactly what he was doing. A lot of these, you have to be careful these days. There's a lot of people out there that they'll just fix something just long enough to get rid of it, and when you get it, it's gone. But that's the way this guy was. He knew how just to jimmy rig something just right, just long enough to get it off the lot in a few days, and And then he was stuck with it. Well, here's what I ended up doing. I ended up calling the Attorney General's office in Columbus, filing a complaint against this guy. And but they had sent him a letter after I complained about it, sent the letter up to them and called him. And they told me that they would send him a letter and they would be in touch with him to see if there was anything they could do to get him to change his mind. But the guy, he just wasn't budging. It was, you know what, he didn't care. There was nothing he was going to do to help us out. And it was ours. We were stuck with it. Went and tried to talk to him again about, working out some kind of an arrangement or something to where, he would pay for the labor and I would pay for the parts or whatever we had to do to get that done. But he wasn't having anything in the world doing with that. And but I said that tonight to say this. God expects us to be honest. God expects us to be just in our dealings in the everyday business things that we do in life, and we're not to be deceitful about that. Going back to that story, that guy, to me, he should have been willing to take that car back, or he should have been willing to fix that car, to do what it took to make it right with me, but he was not like that at all. He was not like that at all. But here's the thing about it that really got me the most was this boy that we bought the car of. He actually went to the same church that we went to. He did not know that at the time, but we ended up going to the same church together. And so I kind of went and talked to the pastor about that there, just to get his input, just to get his advice to see what what he thought I should do. And the pastor actually sat down with this boy and talked to him a little bit. And basically that boy said the same thing. He said, listen, I'm in business to make money, and it's my right once they take that car off the lot. It's theirs. I don't have to do anything by law. And but anyway, we went back and we started talking to him a little bit more, and the Attorney General got involved a little bit more. And it ended up, it all worked out in the end, because we ended up actually coming to an agreement with him that we did just what we said. He would pay half and I would pay half. So we ended up getting another transmission, and it all worked out in the end. But we have to be careful. There's people like that all over the place. And I'm what they call a wheeler and dealer. I like to wheel and deal in things every now and again. But if I'm ever selling anything or anything like that, I always make sure that I always disclose everything that I know about this piece of equipment, or everything I know about this, or everything I know about that. And that's the way God expects us to be in our everyday lives. And back in the day, that's how people bought and sold things, was by weight. And they had to make sure, store owners and business owners, they had to make sure that their scales were exactly right, because if they weren't, they had that label. If they were caught cheating people, they would lose business. In fact, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was even an offense that was able to be prosecuted back then. And they had to be very careful in those dealings, and not to mention the honor that they would lose from people, that people would start thinking bad about them and talking bad about them. But let me say this to you tonight. God is always watching us, everything we do. And I'll use this analogy tonight. He pays attention to every ounce and to every weight and every pound that we have and things that we do in life. And let me say that you will never get ahead in life by cheating somebody. It'll always come back in the end to bite you, and you'll find that out the hard way. False balance is an abomination to the Lord, but the Lord likes a just person. The Lord expects us to be just. The Lord expects us to be fair in everything that we do. Verse number 2 goes on to say, when pride cometh, then cometh shame, but with the lowly is wisdom. Let me say this about that. Pride tonight. We know that the dangers of having too much pride in our lives. And pride will even distort our decision-making ability at times. And a prideful man or an arrogant man or a haughty man will eventually make those costly mistakes. And pride will cause you to make foolish choices that could cause shame on you. And eventually, in the end, it will be your downfall, and it will eventually destroy you. We know that it was pride that caused Satan to be cast out of heaven and caused him to be in an eternal hell. It was pride that caused Pharaoh, who at the time was the greatest king of all time. We know that it was pride that destroyed him. We know that it was pride that destroyed his family. We know that it was pride that destroyed his nation. We know that it was pride that destroyed his army. We know the Bible says in the book of Proverbs as well that pride goeth before destruction. We could look, if we took the time tonight, we could look all through the Scriptures tonight, and we could find example after example after example of how pride was the downfall of so many people in the Bible. And we need to remember that pride is something that God does not like. It's something that God is not pleased with. Notice that last part of that verse. He goes on to say that the lowly is, but with the lowly is wisdom. And tonight we know that lowliness is wisdom. When a man's wisdom, with a man's wisdom comes respect. But not only respect, but also comes with man's wisdom is honor. And when we have that honor, it kind of just makes our faces kind of shine, and it makes our faces shine and glitter and glow before others. Pride goeth before destruction. Verse number 3 goes on to say this. It says, the integrity of the upright shall guide them, but the perverseness of transgressors shall destroy them. One writer said this. He said, the integrity of an honest man will be his guide. Somebody tonight, give me the definition of integrity. Somebody tell me give me a good definition. Integrity.
Character, maybe?
Okay? Yep.
The quality of being honest and having a strong moral principle.
Okay? One commentary, the one that I was studying through today, said this. He defined integrity as this. He said it is the glorious character trait of always doing what is right, regardless of the difficulty or regardless of the consequences. That was his definition of integrity. That verse also goes on to say, but the perverseness of transgressors shall destroy them. Somebody give me a good definition of perverseness.
Just like integrity represents wholeness and soundness, perverseness is like a rottenness. It's a twisting of what's good and what's holy.
Okay. One writer said this today, the same writer that I was looking at said this about perverseness. He said it is the turning away from what is right to act contrary to law or nature. Now, I don't know about you, but I surely would like to be remembered and have the reputation of being a man of integrity. I really do. I want to have the reputation of a man that is honest. And like I said, I make sure when I'm doing some business transactions or anything that I do, I always want to make sure that I tell them exactly everything that I know. I want to be remembered as a man of integrity. I want to be known as a man that is honest. And I believe that that's exactly how God wants us to be. And I believe that's exactly how we should be in our everyday life. Listen, God will punish us in the end if we're not honest. I had a man, he told me one time something that made a lot of sense to me. We were talking about something that his kid did. I don't remember exactly what it was. They did. He worked on a lot of cars, but I can't remember exactly what it was. But he ended up buying something at one time, and I wish I could remember what it was, but I can't. But he bought something at one time from a store, and later on, about 2 months down the road, that thing, they ended up, bought it from AutoZone. It ended up, it was like a $200 or $300 piece of equipment or something for his car, but they ended up discontinuing the rest of those parts for that car, and they had it marked way down. So he took the one, he went and bought one, and then he took it back with the original receipt that he had to get his full refund back out of it. And we was talking about that one day, and here's what he told me. He says, he says, I'll tell you right now, he said, God got even with him. He says, because God ended up getting 3 times the amount of money out of him. Because after he did that, 2 days later, his car blew completely up. And he ended up having to put a new motor and some other things in his car. So I said that to say this. We need to be honest in everything that we do. Because eventually it will catch up with us in the end. Just like it caught up with him. He tried to cheat somebody, and it ended up, God will take your money one way or the other. Let's put it that way. And that's exactly what happened to him. If we want the blessings of God in our lives, if we want to be known as a person of integrity, if we want to be known as a person that's honest, then we need to do exactly what God says and be honest and fair about those things. I remember when I was praying about becoming pastor here at Faith Baptist Church, I was talking to a gentleman on the phone about this church. And I won't tell you any names, but he mentioned one particular person here in this church. He told me, we got talking about some of the folks that were here. And here's what he told me. He told me, and I'm not going to tell you who it is, but he told me, he said, let me tell you something about that man right there. He said, that man is the most honest man that you will ever find anywhere on the face of this earth. He says, you can believe anything he tells you, and you can also trust him with anything, because that's the reputation that this man had. And I just happened to, was thinking to myself today about that, and I thought to myself, what a testimony that is, not only to your church folks, but to people on the outside. If other people see you being that way, that's a good reputation to have. And I thank God for that person telling me that, and I thank God that there's people, and I'm not just saying that there's just one here, because I know my church, and I know there's a lot of people, and I know we all are that way. And I thank God for a church tonight that has people in it that have good reputations about being men and women of integrity, and men and women that are honest. And I thank God for that tonight. Let's move on to verse 4. Riches profit, and this will be the last verse. Riches profit not in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivereth from death. I want to say this about that verse. God's wrath against sinners is coming. And when it comes, it may bring an early death to them in this world, but in the end, it's really and surely going to bring an eternal death to them. It may not happen today, it may not happen tomorrow, but we know eventually that it will bring an eternal death to them. And what I like about this verse, the thing about that is, and there's no amount of money, there's no amount of riches that they have that can save them from dying and going into an eternal hell. We know that righteousness is doing those things that pleases God. And if we're a righteous person, we know that defers God's wrath to us, and it saves us and in the day of judgment, because we know those who aren't righteous, they have rejected God's righteousness. They have rejected God. And we know, and they'll be cast into the lake of fire. And we know that it just goes right there. It says, riches profit not in the day of wrath. In other words, there's nothing they can do. No amount of money in the end is going to save them from dying and going to hell. God has made you righteous with His righteousness. And the best example of that is just simply by living a life that is holy, by living a righteous life in the sight of man and in the sight of God. Riches profit not in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivereth from death. If we live a life that's righteous, if we're a righteous person, if we're living a life that is pleasing to God, the Bible just simply says that we're saved from that. We have an eternal home, we have an eternal Savior that loves us and cares for us, and in the end, we're saved from that. We don't have to worry about what kind of riches we have or what kind of money we have down here on earth. We're already home in heaven. So, well, that's probably the first 4 verses of Proverbs. We're over time tonight, and we always seem to run short on Wednesday night on time to get very far. But we'll pick up to, next week, verse 5, and try to get down maybe through verse 11 or 12 next week. This book of Proverbs is a great book. Somebody asked me the other day, in fact, I think it was Matt, came up to me last week. I don't know if I told you this or not, but I think it was wasn't this past Sunday night. It was a week ago, 10 days ago, on Sunday, the Sunday after Christmas. Some of you might know Margie's daughter, Sarah, her boyfriend